Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Climbing Sycamores podcast, where we look at today's topics to get a better view of Christianity. I'm Annie Beege, and I'm joined by my friends Ben Sadler and Matt Harbach.
Hey, today we're going to talk about a book called Cynical Theories, and the book is all about some of the ideologies that are going on in our world today that are causing more violence and problems in our world today. What I love about the book is how it begins by saying there is such a thing as real racism, real prejudice, real oppression in our world. The problem is that the recent ideologies and the recent methods of trying to eradicate those problems are not working. There's a lot of sensitive topics we're talking about in this discussion, and so if you have any questions or comments or reactions, please feel free to email us in the email that is on our notes in the bottom of this podcast. All right, enjoy. What did you want to talk about, Annie?
Well, no, just Christmas. So we're entering the holiday season.
And you said you're trying?
I'm trying. So historically, I'm the church Grinch. And I think, and we've maybe talked about this before, it's just a very bustling time. Our whole family, like my husband, myself, and our two kids, all have birthdays in November and December. So now we got parties and gifts for that and planning for those types of things. And then in addition to that, we've got a lot of extra services around church and just scheduling people's a night. It's just, and then there's, the children's Christmas programs and all this other feel-goodery around this time of year that just seems
disgusting.
It just seems to go away. Like it goes away, and it's like, okay, well, we could do this all year. Anyway, this year I'm trying really hard. I went out, I bought 2 Christmas candles. I'm ready. They smell like pine,
gingerbread.
Yeah, all the Christmassy things. Yep.
It's very girly.
I know. I know. Look at I'm trying to be a girl and I'm trying to be a fan of Christmas.
The 12-foot inflatable Santa in the front yard.
I know I have not done that. And then I bought a Christmas throw blanket to bring out when we start decorating. So I'm trying.
How'd that feel? Was it hard to do that, or
do you feel dirty?
No, not really. I think part of it too is I'm a little bit more ahead in planning church stuff also. Yeah. That makes a huge, huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just for everything. So I feel like I maybe have a little bit more space to enjoy it and be more festive.
That's great.
We've been planning Christmas here for 2 months now. We're into November, so that's another month. And December is the 4th month, so...
And it kind of works. I mean, it has to work that way, I think, for us to all not lose our minds and schedule rehearsals and all that type of stuff. So
that is my biggest. I have lots of downfalls, but like thinking far enough ahead, because I can pretty adapt to situations. Mm-hmm. I think, or maybe because I have to adapt because I don't plan ahead. Maybe that's how they all work together. Way, but like. That it works out so much better when you plan way ahead, and I just don't do it enough.
Well, and I think if your job and your role is really highly dependent on other people,
yes.
Like for me, I've got a team of musicians, multiple teams of multiple musicians,
right?
And trying to coordinate a time for everybody to get together to practice, like it has to be done in advance.
Yeah, that's right.
Because everybody is so stinking busy. Like it's. I don't know what this phenomenon is, but like we're all busy, like beyond.
Yeah,
manageability at times. So
we need another pandemic. Just kidding.
No. I think it's because of the pandemic that we're super busy.
It's just amazing how all that went away when we were stuck in our homes, and then we brought it all back. And,
we really missed it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm trying this year. That's my story.
That's good. So what I want to talk about, something that I thought about years ago. I remember reading this book, Cynical Theories, a book that Pastor Bill told me about. Helen Plunkrose and James Lindsay, they wrote this book, Cynical Theories, to play off the idea of critical theories, and in the subtitles, How Activist Scholarship Made Everything About Race, Gender, and Identity, and Why This Harms Everybody. Now, these writers are not Christian. They're not they're secular writers, but they're watching this world, this theory take over the world of intersectionality, of critical theory, And maybe you're not even familiar with any of those terms.
Yeah, what is that?
I'll kind of go into that. But you might just be watching the news and have lots of questions in the world. Like, the question I have is like, all right, why, when we have a terrorist event back in 9/11, 2001, terrorists fly into those trade centers, basically the whole world says this was wrong and says this can't happen again. But now, 2023, in October, the Hamas terrorists came in and did brutally horrible things to Jews. I mean, raping women, torturing children, horrible things. And they still have hostages right now. They still have hundreds and hundreds of hostages. And yet, all over campuses throughout the United States, there are pro-Hamas rallies.
So what happened in the last 20 years?
Yeah, exactly. How could we side with different groups, and where does this come from? And so it really does, I think, come down to intersectionality. And what's interesting is even secular atheists, like militant atheists, are watching kind of their progressive ideas come off the rails. So Bill Maher is like a really kind of hardcore atheist, makes fun of Christians. But I've actually watched some of his monologues lately, and I'd say that with trepidation, but because he's so vile. But he is saying this is outrageous what we're doing. And he accurately explains the issue that intersectionality is this idea that you intersect at your victimhood. And so you could have totally different value systems, but if you can put yourself in the victimhood category, whether you're a minority, a sexual minority, whether you're a political minority, whatever you could, and they keep on changing whatever you can call victimhood, maybe it's a financial minority, something like that, then you can all come together and have this solidarity in your victimhood, and you can overthrow the oppressor. And so Bill Maher's talked about how we've put the whole world into two categories of oppressor and the oppressed. And as long as you're not the oppressor, you can do whatever you want. You can, again, horribly as it sounds, rape women and torture children, and that's okay because you're a victim and you're in the victimhood category, and we're not even going to talk about that. And I thought that was totally bizarre, but I read this book, Cynical Theories, and he predicted all of this stuff. I don't know when the book was written. All right, copyright 2020. So book's pretty recent, but he really talked about how dangerous. So I'm just going to read a paragraph, and we'll see what you think. He says, there is nothing complex about the overarching idea of intersectionality or the theories upon which it is built. Nothing could be simpler. It does the same thing over and over again. Look for the power imbalances, bigotry, and biases that it assumes must be present and pick at them. It reduces everything to a single variable, one single topic of conversation, one single focus and interpretation, prejudice, as understood under the power dynamics asserted by theory or critical race theory. Thus, for example, disparate outcomes can have one and only one explanation, and it is this: prejudice and bigotry. The question is about identifying how it manifests in a given situation. Thus, it always assumes that in every situation, some form of prejudice exists, and we must find a way to show evidence of it. In that sense, it is a tool, a practice, designed to flatten all complexity and nuance so that it can promote identity politics in accordance with its vision. So, I mean, that's a deep, deep idea there, but the idea is you put everything in these two categories of oppressed and oppressor. Now, the reality is, and they talk about this in the book, is that there is oppression. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There are
challenges.
There
right?
is challenges. Yeah. There is abuse.
Yeah.
But very often when I've talked to victims of abuse, they call themselves survivors and find ways to get out of this, find ways of moving forward, to not not to kind of perpetually find yourself in the victimhood setting, and then to think that now what I have to do is level anyone who's above me. And the question is always, and then what? And that's never answered. All right, after you level everyone above you, because that's like, and this, I mean, to be honest, a lot of the things that were going on in 2020 with all the race riots and Black Lives Matter. Now, do Black Lives Matter? Yes, obviously. But the organization, which now has sided with Hamas, I don't know if you saw that, but Black Lives Matter put a parachuter logo on their, I don't know if it was on their website or on their social media. So they were finding solidarity with Hamas. This idea that because we're an oppressed group, we can destroy businesses.
Why is Hamas an oppressed group?
Exactly. That is the question. What's oppressed? Nothing. They call Israel and the Jewish population, the Jewish ethnicity, their oppressor. Although there's Palestinian countries all over the world, but I mean, Hamas has made it very clear they're not going to stop until every Jew is eradicated. Every Jew is totally killed. So I think this is just important to talk about, understand the philosophies on how we got here, understand the philosophies behind this, because, 80 years ago, if you were a Christian living at the time of the Holocaust, many of them didn't know what was going on, and they colluded with the Nazis because, hey, the Nazis were keeping their churches open, and they didn't realize what was all going on, and they're like, oh yeah, well, the Jews aren't Christians anyways, and yeah, maybe we shouldn't support their businesses or whatever, and they didn't realize that they were actually being taken away into concentration camps, so it wasn't really found out till later. I don't want us as Christians to not be able to read the signs of the times, to be able to see that behind these ideologies and how they work, and that they're not Christian. They might sound Christian, that we should stand up for the oppressed. Yes, we should. How do you do that?
It's almost they're like manipulating the situation,
right.
They're discreetly actually the oppressor. Like the oppressed in this situation almost feels like the oppressor.
Yes.
And they're using that victimhood to manipulate and not have, I don't want to say legitimate reasons, but sometimes, how legitimate are the reasons for their victimhood? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if they are legitimate, all right, how are we going to, Martin Luther King Jr. staged non-violent protest. He fought for changes in the government. He fought for changes in society, and his goal was that, that people would be judged not by their color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That's very different than somebody saying, I'm oppressed, so I can destroy anybody that I think is in the oppressor class by destroying their businesses. So like even right now, like in New York, there's like Jewish delis that are being totally destroyed. They have no idea they have no part in what's going on in the Middle East, but just because they're Jewish and it's a Jewish deli, you can destroy that deli because they're part of the oppressor class.
Well, that's the thing. It almost seems like it doesn't take much to be an oppressor by their definition. Like it's just simply existing, or maybe if you're not with us, you're against us.
Exactly.
So like it takes almost nothing to be one of these oppressors by their definition. Like you're just existing.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Big talk there, Whitey. We're all guilty of it.
So, that he does talk about that in this book, is the reality is that a lot of it is, a straight white male is at the top of this oppressor group, and then it kind of goes down from there. And that's why you could put many Jewish people. Now, the irony is in Israel, if you were to be a homosexual, minority, or whatever, in Israel, you would have way more protection and find way more freedom than if you lived in Gaza. Hamas would kill you just for being in any of those different groups. So it's totally illogical. You're siding with your enemy.
Yes.
And you're colluding with somebody who would chop your head off. And yet because of, again, this intersectionality philosophy that we all collude with other oppressors to throw off or with other people who are oppressed, it's just totally irrational. But when you take away biblical morality, the idea of that all humans are created in the image of God and all of them have dignity and respect, and you take away morality, Michel Foucault, he was a secular philosopher, and he really said, after you get rid of God, now all you have is power struggle, and that's what this is. It's all power struggle, and so it's kind of inevitable. Nietzsche predicted that this was going to happen, but I think it's important for us to talk about, because as nonsensical as it is, at least you kind of know where it comes from, so you don't fall prey to it. Because you can hear half truths, like, are people oppressed? Yes. Is there racism? Yes. Is there prejudice? Yes. Does that mean that the answer is to go destroy every building or business or life or kill anybody who looks like somebody who could have been who oppressed you?
Right. As I'm saying,
No.
It doesn't take much to be the oppressor.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, it's just, yeah. And so he talks about, like, he says, Asians and Jews may find themselves stripped of marginalized status due to their comparative economic success of their demographics and their participation in whiteness or other factors. You know, so queerness needs to be decolonized, meaning made more racially diverse. You know, so you have to keep intersecting with as many minority groups to make sure you're not the oppressor. And if you are just simple, you're part of the oppressed.
That's the thing. I feel like, it's just, I didn't do anything. I
Right.
don't know,
Right, but you just have to keep apologizing for something you didn't do, and you're never going to apologize enough. You're never going to get out of that status. So it's hurting society incredibly.
Even our discussion about this could be deemed oppressive.
Right.
You are oppressive.
We are being oppressive right now by discussing this.
Even bringing it up.
Even bringing it up. Yeah.
Yes. And which I think is a lot of what's going on campus. Like, you can talk about a lot of things, but you can't talk about this because this is hate speech. This is microaggressions. This is all these kinds of things. And yet, if you are part of the oppressed group, you can destroy buildings. You can hurt people.
Act like a 2-year-old.
Act like do all this kinds of stuff.
You have permission to do that because you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so what we need to do is with the little bit of power that we have, in the sense of the influence we have with people, is like, as a pastor, I think my role and as a father is to not promote victimhood. If you're, I always talk to my son about, like, you never hit a girl. You never, use whatever power you have. Jesus talked about this. Use whatever to serve. And don't put yourself, and do what you can to protect victims, but never take that identity of victimhood. Because even psychologically, what they found is people who have an external locus of control, like they think the whole world is against them, they can't do anything about it. Those are the people who are the most fearful and depressed people out there, because they feel totally overwhelmed. And that's kind of what this is saying. Like, all your problems are outside of you. If it wasn't for this oppressor class, you would be just fine. And so with that angst, you should destroy them. What we should be teaching people is, be as strong as you can internally. Be able to be resilient. If somebody gives you a bad day or gives you a bad review or whatever, be able to take it a little bit and be resilient. Teach resiliency. And then teach, that look at people as people. Don't look at people, reduce everything to classes or victimhood. It's just...
Are we saying that, though, from a particular, Privilege, yeah.
I'm going to jump in here.
Yeah. Let's go. Go for it.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Like, some people are going to start higher up on the ladder than other people, but you can't go anywhere but up the ladder. Like, I just read an article this morning. So kind of off topic. It was about money.
Okay.
It was about how many Americans are living paycheck to paycheck.
Okay.
And the article said something like, okay, it's like, it's above half, depending on your income bracket. It's like 60, 70%, which is ridiculous.
Whoa.
And the article starts out like, due to the ongoing inflation and the Fed keeps the interest rates high, wages have gone down, right? But every paragraph had this slant, like it's the government. It's kind of the government's fault. The government should really fix this, And it was like Americans can't keep up with these financial struggles because inflation is so high.
No, it's because you're at Starbucks every other day.
It's if you don't have money, then a 5% inflation, if that kills you, you were already dead.
Yeah, right.
But it's that mentality, and the article assumes, gee, if we had inflation back down to 3% where it was, everyone would be just fine. No. People have no idea what they're doing with their money, But it's like we could just like you feed into people's fears, and you tell them what you want to hear when you're just like, it's somebody else's fault.
Well, that's the thing. I think we're
victim.
we're not holding people accountable. And listen, don't get me wrong. Some people struggle financially, have legitimate struggles. But there are people who are, they are spend happy, and they instead of they get their Starbucks every day, and that they don't cut where they maybe need to, and they're not responsible with their money. So it's the government's fault. It's not you who's spending money ridiculously and frivolously.
And what can you do about that, right? Like, what can you really control? You can control yourself, and your behaviors. Now, when there's systemic, or racism or things like that, like let's address those things. But like, we're undermining so much that was done in the civil rights movement. We're undermining so much that was done in so many different categories by continuing to perpetuate this idea. I think Thomas Sowell is an academic black teacher at Harvard, and he just talks about this over and over again, how continuing to perpetuate this victimhood mentality is not good for any race, is not good for any group of people.
Or the actual victims.
Exactly. It's not good for them either. It's not, exactly. That's what it is. It's not good for anybody.
Just because you're right doesn't help you at all.
Right.
You could say, yes, it's somebody else's fault, and yes, I've been the victim of bad circumstances, but then, okay, great. Now what? You're stuck there?
Right.
And you're right, but that doesn't help you at all. You still lose. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And then all society loses if all your energy is to just tear down whatever you think is keeping you down. And maybe is what keeping you down, some policies, but don't destroy every business on your block. That's not going to help you. Raiding places or hurting people or this, in the Arab or the Gaza Hamas Israeli conflict, like Israel pulled out of Gaza, said, you guys do whatever you want. We'll give you that land. We're not going to touch it. And they voted in Hamas. And a lot of the people who were part of that terrorist act were civilians from Palestine, not just the Hamas terrorists. And they're not being oppressed by them. So it's so nonsensical to me. But if you tell yourself I'm a victim, then I can do anything I want to these oppressors. So it's what can you control? What can you learn from some of the situations that you're in? And yeah, that's what I think is the most important thing that we teach people, especially young people. Just what can you control? Do what you can. After you've been as responsible as you can with your money, with your time, with your effort, after you've used all the opportunities that are available to you, because there are different opportunities that are available to me as being living in the suburbs, being middle class or whatever, than anybody in all different places of the world. But everybody in every place of the world has that choice to say, I can do the best with what I've been given. And I think I could also look and say I'm a victim because I'm not born in Hollywood, or I'm not born into this family, or I didn't have this one stuff. Like we could all play that card. It just doesn't help. And I've had my own pity parties too, but it doesn't help when I do it. Like you said, you lose twice.
So great word, intersectionality, that I have heard, but I didn't really know what it meant. But if you remember back when we watched that new Batman film,
Oh yeah.
I didn't have the word for it then. We didn't have the word for it then, maybe, but that absolutely came up, and I just was thinking of between that movie and tons of movies, but a couple that really stick out to me. And then there was this show earlier this year that came out Wednesday on Netflix. Wednesday Addams.
Yeah.
I did not see it.
Oh, count your blessings! Absolute train wreck, garbage,
I didn't mind it.
garbage show. Everything about it I pretty much hated, except for and it doesn't matter. But in that show, it's so overt that there's this school. It's kind of like Hogwarts, where it's a school, but it's not just magicians. It's like werewolves and different. What do they call them? Outcasts or something. But it's all the weirdos, and they're oppressed by the people in town who are descended from white Christian pilgrims. So it's white Christian men versus all these
Outcasts.
And
People living on born on the fringe.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's all over the place. And again, the writing's terrible. You don't have to take the show seriously, but that just is everywhere.
Interesting.
So what and how in Batman? Because I was thinking about some of these things, but how did you see it come up in Batman?
So it's been a while since I've seen that. But Catwoman. She's got several lines and scenes about that where she's kind of poking into Bruce Wayne's privilege, right?
Yes,
and
I
so
remember.
and she's African American too, right?
Yeah.
Right. So they need her to be of an oppressed race, and she's of course an oppressed gender, so that she can represent the other side. Because Batman is a white guy, that's kind of been established, but we need to have that other perspective. So she has to be an angry, black woman who can then complain about all this stuff.
I think
that's a big part of it.
Well, I thought they also was a comment on it. Maybe even the other side of that movie, Batman, was to call him "I am vengeance," and he was seeing that this vengeance wasn't getting him anywhere. And I thought that's another message we almost kind of need, is kind of put in our face, at the end of the day, if we're all just going to play the victimhood and try to tear down whatever's above us, what are we going to build after that?
Sure. Yeah.
And so one of what I do appreciate about this book is it does kind of say well, what should we do about this? And they talked more about, individual liberty, just kind of the tenets of how our country was founded. Individual liberty, equality of opportunity is different than equality of outcomes, or equanimity is another way to say it. So what can we do to make sure everybody has equality of opportunity? And I think that's what so many of the laws were trying to do 20, 30 years ago. How can you make sure whatever your race or background or whatever, you have equal opportunity to have education? And that's really what changes everything. And that's still hard.
Yeah, I don't know how much... intentions aside, I don't know. I definitely think that there is a disparity.
Yeah, there's. But then, so what's the answer to that? Is the answer equal outcomes? If you see an outcome of one group seems to be excelling or whatever, so why don't we find out what that group is doing, and then teach those things, or try to create that same situation in other groups, not take the group that seems to be excelling, whatever that is,
and pull them
down. And that's kind of what we're doing, is anybody who seems to be on top, we got to pull them down, instead of saying, how can we all learn from that group of people? So I think that's an idea, and just it really, I think, does an injustice to people, minorities or any group, that are actually oppressed. It takes that truth and puts it on its edge. It doesn't actually deal with the problem. And and doesn't actually help different groups
Yeah.
of people. It just makes people angry and
Yeah.
doesn't give them what they need. I remember reading, I don't know where I got like a dollar store or something. This was decades, or maybe a long time ago. I read Frederick Douglass's autobiography. And what was so fascinating about this, he looks at his being liberated from slavery came from reading, he said. And that was one of the things that made the slave owners did not want their slaves to know is how to read. But he found a couple little things that he could read, and then he talked to some of the white teenagers or some of the little kids in town, and he would make them come in and teach them word after word after word until he learned how to read. And all of a sudden, when you had these ideas and you were able to read, like you had a power that nobody else had. And so that's a big thing that I think Thomas Sowell too is like teaching skills, teaching language, giving people useful things that they can do to contribute to society is a totally different way to do this than just making people angry and feeling like victims.
There's a great Thomas Sowell quote where somebody asks him in an interview, like, imagine, like, what would you say to your younger self? Like, you're a young black man, you don't know your place in the world, whatever. Like, what is a piece of advice? And he said, well, just the same advice I would give anybody, which is equip yourself with skills that people are willing to pay you for.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got nothing to do with your skin color. It's just like, go make yourself useful.
I know, but I do struggle with that because I really don't want to ignore the fact that there are challenges.
Right. There's real racism.
Yes, like
there's real racism. There's people who
exists,
don't hire somebody because they look at them and they make a judgment about their color.
Well, and I even think about, just education and, housing and communities. And I think there is something, I mean, it exists and there's.
But what can you do about that? You can move forward or you can stay where you are.
No, I agree with you. So I do. Yes, I want to acknowledge that. And I also think that there does need to be accountability as well. So, I mean, I see both, but that is also easy for me to say
as a woman, oppressed all the time,
as a white woman, middle class.
Yeah.
I think for me, when you really do believe and experience what God says about every person is made in the image of God and deserves to be treated that way. And what I think keeps us from believing that is separation. And what I don't like about this intersectionality, it continues to foster bigger barriers between groups. Like, I'm always in this group and you're always in this group. And so these groups can never be together because I'm always in the victim group and you are always in the oppressor group. And the groups will never intertwine. I can't change from I'm in the oppressed group. I can't become in a different group. I can't grow skills. I'm always going to stay down here. You're always going to stay over there. And so I'm always going to hate you and you're always going to be my problem. For me, a big change was learning Spanish. Is like, so those Latinos out there, they were different. And I think seen racism in my city growing up where, those people who spoke Spanish, they were the cabbage pickers, and that's what they did. They picked cabbage in our neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And you distance yourself from them, and so you had this idea of this group, but you learn the language. I remember going to Ecuador. I'm sitting in this house listening to, and I finally knew enough Spanish to be able to understand what was going on, like listening to the father joke around and laugh with his wife. I'm like, that's the same thing my dad says to my mom, but it's in Spanish. Mm-hmm. And if I didn't know the language, I would not know what was going on. But now that I do, the closer I get to them, like, people are people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're missing with so many of these things. We continue to objectify people, put them in these different groups. We don't see the potential in every human being. We just see them as a problem. And that's what Hamas is doing. They don't care who you are. If you're a Jew,
right,
they don't care about if you're a good person or a bad person. You are always their enemy, and they are trying to eradicate you. That's what Nazism did. That's what all these groups have done. So we have to look at how these ideologies, is this helping? Is there real oppression? Yes. But does intersectionality solve the problem? Absolutely not.
Right.
Absolutely not. And so that's They might have identified a problem. There's racism, there's prejudice, but to solidify these categories, and then the answer is to tear down anything that is perceived injustice above you, these oppressors, that is not the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
Yep.
I guess why this is a Christian podcast is I think the Christian message is we find our identity in the image of God. That's one thing, that all humans are created by God and they're made in God's image, and so they deserve protection. And then secondly, in the redemption of God in Jesus Christ, that God became a human.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a footprint and he had a fingerprint and he was among us. And yeah, he was a Jewish man living in the Middle East, all these things. And he redeemed the world by dying for the people who hated him. And those two things form our understanding of our values, that we believe all people are equal, and we believe the greatest thing you can do is serve humanity. And those things are turned on their head in these kinds of ideologies. And they're just ask yourself, is this helping? Are these ideologies helping? They are not. I feel like they've taken us steps back where we seemed in some areas to be going forward. So I appreciate you guys being willing to talk about it. And I just pray that I'm wrong on this, because I think it's going to get worse. I think we're going to continue in this victimhood mentality, and we're all going to try to find ways to put ourselves, and I want to empower people to say, see yourself as a survivor, be about a solution that means loving people and treating people equally, and do everything we can to give people the kind of skills and education so that they can make a positive difference and not tear people down. Amen.
Amen.
Truth.
All right.
If you'd like to get a hold of us here at the Climbing Sycamores podcast, feel free to email bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. If you like today's intro music, it's been brought to you by Andrew Lynch's song, My Name, Hello.